The knife came out of nowhere, and Isaac Boone had exactly one heartbeat to decide if he was going to die for a woman he had met 40 minutes ago. He decided yes. The blade was a short, ugly thing. The kind of knife a merchant hides inside his boot because it is too dishonorable to wear on his belt, and it was already moving when Isaac shoved himself between the wielder and Ugek Wildheart, champion of the Ironmaw clan, who stood at his back with her arms crossed and had no idea what was coming for her from the left side of the crowded harvest hall. The knife missed his ear by the width of a coin. The man who held it stumbled forward with the force of his own lunge, crashed into a trestle table loaded with smoked meats and autumn squash, and went down hard in a cascade of clay pitchers and spilled mead. The whole east end of the Ashford Harvest Hall went silent. Lantern lights swung overhead. The smell of fresh-pressed cider and sawdust hung in the air. Then Ugek Wildheart was beside him, and she was not smiling. She was taller than every man in the room by a full head, and broader through the shoulder than most two men standing together. She wore fitted warrior's leathers the deep color of old copper, laced tight from collarbone to hip over a dark green undershirt that caught the lantern light whenever she moved, and the whole outfit traced a figure that had made men and women alike forget what they were saying since she had walked through the hall's double doors. Her tusks were smooth ivory, lower ones curved just enough to catch the light, and her skin was a rich, deep jade green that the lantern glow turned almost bronze. Her black hair was pulled back in a braided warrior's knot threaded with small copper rings, and her eyes were amber, not the dull gold of old coins, but the alive, burning amber of a fire seen through glass. She looked down at Isaac Boone, who was 5 feet 8 inches of sun-browned, rope-muscled dockhand from the harbor town of Grayville, and who barely came up to her chin. Then she looked at the man on the floor, who was picking squash off his face and reaching for the knife he had dropped. Isaac put his boot on the knife. "I would not," he said, and his voice was very calm. The man on the floor was named Harren Cole, and the whole hall knew him. He was a buyer for one of the inland merchant guilds, well-dressed, well-fed, the kind of man who paid others to do his violence and was embarrassed that he had been forced to do it himself tonight. He had blood from a cut on his chin where he had hit the table edge, and his eyes were full of hate. They moved from Isaac to Ugek and back again. "She stole from our guild house," Harren said, loud enough for the room. "Every person in this hall should be helping me take her down." "She did not steal anything," Isaac said. He had not raised his voice. He had not moved his boot. "And you were just about to put that knife in her back, which makes everything you are saying a great deal less convincing." Ugek put a hand on Isaac's shoulder from behind, not grabbing, not steadying, just resting there large and warm with a weight that said something without words. "I can speak for myself, human," she said, but the hand did not move. "I know you can," Isaac said, still watching Harren Cole. "But you were busy watching the door and he came from the side, and you were about to take a knife you did not see, so I stepped in. If that offends you, we can argue about it later when nobody is trying to stab either of us." A beat of silence. He thought he heard something close to a breath of surprised amusement from directly behind him, which was not a sound he had expected from the orc champion of the Ironmaw clan. "You have 2 minutes," she told Harren Cole. "To take yourself and your knife out of this hall before I decide your behavior was a personal insult against my clan's honor, at which point the conversation will become significantly less civil." Harren Cole looked at Ugek. He looked at Isaac. He looked at the room full of people, all watching, none of them moving to help him. He picked himself up, snatched the knife from under Isaac's boot the moment Isaac lifted it, and walked out with the shaking dignity of a man who has lost something in public and has not yet admitted it to himself. The hall exhaled. The noise resumed. Somewhere a fiddle started playing again, ragged and quick, and the moment dissolved into the general roar of the Ashford Harvest Fair. Ugek Wildheart turned Isaac Boone around by his shoulder so she could look at his face. He had a long jaw and honest eyes, gray as harbor water, and he was looking at her with the same steady expression he had used on Harren Cole, which meant he was not afraid of her, which was unusual. Most humans, when they found themselves within arm's reach of her, tended to discover urgent business on the other side of the room. This one just stood there and waited like he had all the time in the world. "You are either very brave," she said, "or you are very stupid." "Dockworker from Grayville," he said. "Bit of both tends to come with the job." She studied him for another moment. "I did not steal anything," she said. "Whatever Cole told this room, the relic he is looking for belongs to my clan. It was taken from Ironmaw lands 3 seasons ago by a man we have been following ever since. That man sold it to a private buyer who came to this fair. I am here to get it back." "What kind of relic?" She looked at him like she was deciding something. "A hearthstone. Red granite, fits in both hands, carved with the Ironmaw glyph on all 6 faces. It was blessed by our elder speaker when our clan first settled the northern range. It is not a weapon. It is not magical in the way humans mean the word. It does not shoot fire or grant visions. It is simply the heart of our hearth home, and without it the hearth house cannot be consecrated, and without consecration we cannot properly mourn our dead or celebrate our living. It matters to us the way a foundation stone matters to a house." Isaac listened to all of this without interrupting. "And you tracked it here to Ashford?" "To this fair, yes. It arrived 2 days ago in a merchant's lockbox. I arrived yesterday. And tonight your friend Cole decided that a clan champion coming to retrieve stolen property was enough of a threat to justify a boot knife in the dark." "He is not my friend," Isaac said. He extended his hand. "Isaac Boone. I work the South Docks in Grayville mostly, but I travel with cargo shipments to the autumn fairs. I am here delivering a commission of cured timber for one of the boat builders in Ashford's harbor quarter." She looked at the hand. Then she took it, and her grip was exactly what he had known it would be: encompassing, enormously strong, and very deliberate. She shook once formally. "Ugek Wildheart." "I know," he said. "Your reputation runs ahead of you. They say you won the champion's belt 3 years running and that you once stopped a trade caravan raid single-handed." "2 of the 3 raiders surrendered," she said. "The 3rd one I had to hit. I prefer to give opponents the chance to make the sensible choice." "Very generous of you." The corner of her mouth moved, just barely. "The relic is being held in the Fairmaster's lock vault overnight before the private auction tomorrow morning. I was planning to speak with the Fairmaster and make my clan's claim official before the auction opens. Cole just decided to skip the speaking part." "The Fairmaster is Oro Ven," Isaac said. "He is fair, but he follows law strictly. If the sale is already registered, he will not cancel it on the word of a single petitioner without proof of original ownership." Ugek looked at him more carefully. "You know Ven. Delivered 3 shipments of dock-treated timber to his new storage house this past spring. We talked. He likes things documented and witnessed. Do you have any documentation of timber delivery that would give you standing in his official chamber?" "I have a signed commission from the Ashford Harbor Guild with Ven's own counterstamp on it, yes." The amber eyes settled on him with new attention. Outside, through the hall's high windows, the Ashford Harvest Fair blazed against the night sky, hundreds of lanterns strung between stalls, the smell of roasting grain and apple wine drifting in on the cold autumn air, the distant drum lines of the evening's competitions carrying through the stone walls. There were merchants from 7 different towns here, and clan delegations from 3 orc holds, and the whole sprawling fair was packed together under a sky that had been threatening snow for 2 days. That snow was now arriving. They both heard it at the same moment: the change in the wind, the heavy silence that fell over the outdoor stalls as the first thick flakes began to drive through the lantern light. Someone inside the hall groaned. Someone else swore about the road back to Millhaven. The fiddle kept playing. Isaac looked at the ceiling. "That is not a light snow." "No," Ugek agreed. "It is not. The pass is north close fast when it comes in from the sea like this. The Ironmaw Range is 3 days north, correct? Closer to 4 on foot. Then nobody is going anywhere until this breaks, which means the fair stays open and the auction goes ahead tomorrow morning, and you are stuck in Ashford until the weather clears." He looked back at her. which also means Cole has time to try something else tonight. Yugek was quiet for a moment. He is not alone, she said. He has 4 men with him, buyers he calls them, but they carry blades and they move like guards. Then we should move quickly. Where are your clanspeople? Did you bring others? 2 scouts. They are working the outer fair grounds. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. We did not anticipate Cole would move tonight in public. We expected he would wait for the auction to complete the transaction, which would have made it legally his purchase and our claim much harder to prove. The fact that he reached for a knife here means something changed. Means he found out who you were, Isaac said, and decided that between you winning in fair proceedings or him dealing with the problem violently, he preferred the second option. He paused. I have a room at the Miller's Lodge on the east side of the fair ground. The rooms there back onto the old granary wall, and there is 1 entrance and 1 exit, which makes it easier to watch. You and your scouts would be safer there tonight than wherever Cole knows you are staying. She gave him a long, measuring look. We have only just met. You have only just met me. I know who you are. He said it simply, without flattery in it. And I am aware of how that sounds, coming from a man you have known for less than an hour, so I will say it differently. I had a chance to stay out of Cole's way, and I did not, which means he is probably going to come looking for me too at some point tonight, and I would rather have the Ironmaw Champion's company if that happens than not. He allowed a small, dry smile, purely practical. Yugek Wildheart looked at him for a long moment. The lantern light caught the copper rings in her hair. Around them the harvest hall carried on its noise and warmth, and outside the snow came down harder and the autumn fair pulled its canvas tighter, and the night settled in with the kind of cold that wanted company. Purely practical, she repeated, and now the corner of her mouth moved again, and this time it kept going until it was a real, actual smile, sharp-edged and private. Show me this room, Isaac Boone. The snow was a full storm by the time they made it across the fairground, the lanterns on the strings bowing under its weight and throwing wild shadows across the stall rows. Isaac walked beside Yugek, or more accurately beside her elbow, which was the height he came to, and neither of them spoke much because the wind was loud, and the footing was treacherous on the straw-covered paths now going slick with wet snow. He did not offer her his arm. She did not look like she needed it, and he had gotten the impression early that offering assistance she had not asked for was something that tried her patience. He led, she followed, and it turned out she had her 2 scouts with her within about 3 minutes of them leaving the hall, 2 young Ironmaw women who materialized from the dark between stalls and fell into step behind their champion without a word. Yugek introduced them over her shoulder as Preth and Dana. They were both armed with short axes and looked at Isaac with the wary suspicion of people who had learned to have it. He nodded at them. He did not make a speech about trustworthiness. He just kept walking. The Miller's Lodge was a timber and stone building that had started its life as part of the granary complex decades ago and had been converted into let rooms for the fair season. Isaac's room was on the ground floor, which he had not liked when he took it for the drafts, but tonight it meant they did not have to navigate stairs in the dark. He had a proper key, an iron box lock, and a room large enough for 5 people to sit without touching. He lit 2 candles from the stub he had left burning. There was a small iron stove in the corner that he stoked with the last of his wood, and a narrow bed against the south wall, a table and 3 stools. The scouts took 2 of the stools. Yugek stood. Isaac sat on the edge of the table. We need to talk about the auction, Yugek said. We do, but first. He reached into his pack, which was on the floor by the bed, and came out with a small wrapped parcel of dried fruit and smoked fish that he had bought from one of the fair stalls that afternoon. He set it on the table between them. Eat something. You look like you have been moving since before first light. She looked at the food. She looked at him. You are very, she started. Practical, he supplied. I was going to say presumptuous, she said, but she sat down on the edge of the bed, which creaked dramatically but held, and reached for a strip of smoked fish. Her scouts took the fruit without being invited, which he approved of. He was not going to eat it anyway. He explained what he knew about Oro Ven and the fair's official dispute procedure. Ven maintained a mediator's chamber at the north end of the fair house, and any registered sale could be challenged by a party with documented claim before the transaction was finalized, meaning before money actually changed hands. The auction was scheduled for the 6th bell of morning. That gave them roughly 7 hours. "If we go to Ven tonight," Isaac said, "he will hear us and he will log the challenge. It will delay the auction until the claim is formally reviewed. It will not guarantee you get the stone back, not without evidence." "I have evidence," Ugek said. She reached into the inside of her leather vest and produced a folded piece of hide, the kind that Orc clans used as official documents, cured stiff and dense and marked with pressed ink clan glyphs. Elder Speaker Mara's own account of the theft, witnessed and stamped, naming the man who took it, the buyer he sold it to, and the buyer's description of the item. "We have tracked this through 2 trades since the original theft." She held it out. Isaac took it carefully and examined it without being able to read the glyphs. "Ven will need this translated. Does he have a ClanScript reader on staff?" "There is one at every major fair by the Interclan Commerce Treaty. Ashford has one." She paused. "His name is Tolo and he is old and he does not like waking up before dawn, but he is honest." Isaac looked at her. "You have done your research." "I am the Ironmaw champion. The Hearthstone is my responsibility. I have been planning this recovery for 8 months." The amber eyes were steady. "What I had not planned for was Harren Cole making a move before I could reach Ven, and I had not planned for the weather, and I had not planned for—" She stopped. "For a dockworker getting in your way," he said. "For someone getting in the way on my behalf," she corrected quietly. "That is not a common thing." The room was warm now from the stove. Outside, the snow drove against the single-shuttered window, and the fair outside had gone mostly quiet, the outdoor stalls all packed up, the crowds retreated to the lodges and the tavern halls. The night had a particular kind of sealed stillness to it, a snowed-in closeness that pressed the world into smaller circles of warmth and candlelight. "Get some sleep," Isaac said, standing. "I will take first watch by the door. I will wake you at the 4th bell, and we will go to Ven before Cole has a chance to reach him first." Ugek looked at him from the bed. The candlelight was warm on her face, and there was something in her expression that she seemed to be working to keep neutral. "You are volunteering to watch a door on behalf of people you have known for 2 hours," she said. "The Hearthstone is a foundation stone," Isaac said. "My whole job is timber and foundations. I have an instinct about things that need to be kept in place." He looked at her, and for a moment the dry humor dropped out of his voice and left something simpler underneath. "I heard what you said. That without it you cannot properly mourn your dead. I lost my mother 2 winters ago. She was buried without ceremony because there was no coin for the harbor priest. I know what it costs to not be able to say goodbye right." He reached for his traveling cloak and pulled it around himself. "Go to sleep, Ugek Wildheart, I will be here." She watched him for another 3 heartbeats. Then she lay back against the wall, tucking one arm under her head, still fully dressed and with her hand near the short axe at her hip, and closed her eyes. In the room's quiet, Isaac could hear the fire. He could hear the snow. He could hear her scouts settling into their corners. He watched the door and he did not sleep, and he thought about foundation stones and what they cost to lose. Oro Ven's mediation chamber was a lamplit room at the back of the fair house, and Ven himself was a square, gray-bearded man of about 50 who received them at the 5th bell of morning, with the resigned expression of someone who had expected something like this to happen before dawn, and had gone to bed wearing his official coat just in case. He looked at Ugek. He looked at Isaac. He looked at the clan document and sent his assistant running for the ClanScript reader without a word. Tolo, the reader, was indeed old and was indeed unhappy, but he was also meticulous in the way that people who have spent their lives working with languages where a single misread glyph can start a border dispute tend to be. He read Ugek's document twice. He read it a 3rd time. Then he set it down and confirmed every single detail she had stated the night before. The hearthstone had been taken from the Ironmaw clan house 3 seasons ago by a man named Kestpharaoh, who had sold it to a Millhaven merchant named Duval for 100 silver pieces. Duval had died the following winter, and his estate had liquidated it to another buyer private, unnamed in the estate records, who had registered it for auction at the Ashford Harvest Fair under the classification of carved decorative mineral, approximate age unknown, religious significance uncertain. 6 lines of careful obfuscation designed to get the stone sold before its owners caught up with it. Venn pulled his official ledger and wrote the challenge. He stamped it. He looked at Ugek. "The auction is halted pending formal review," he said. "The stone remains in the lock vault. Review will take place at the 8th bell in this room with all claimants present." He paused. "The current registered buyer is unnamed in my records. Do you know who it is?" "Haran Cole," Isaac said, "on behalf of the Merchants' Consortium of Millhaven." Venn closed his ledger. "Of course it is," he said. Then he went to get more tea. Walking back across the fairground in the early morning, the snow had stopped overnight, leaving everything thick and white and quiet, the fair's colors muffled under it, the stalls beginning to emerge like objects under a pulled blanket as vendors knocked snow from their awnings. Ugek walked beside Isaac in silence for a moment. Then she said, "You did not have to come with me this morning." "I had the commission document with my counterstamp from Venn," Isaac said. "It established standing for me to be in the room. It would have been inefficient to leave it behind." She made a sound that was not quite a laugh but lived in the same neighborhood. Her breath made clouds in the cold air. "You use the word practical the way some men use armor," she said. He glanced at her. "Does it work?" "It works for about as long as armor does," she said, "which is to say adequately right up until it does not." She looked out over the snow-covered fair, amber eyes catching the flat winter morning light. "What do you actually want from this, Isaac Boone?" "Most humans who find themselves involved with an Ironmaw business claim want to get uninvolved as quickly as they can. You are moving the opposite direction." He thought about it. He was not a man who answered questions before he had the right answer, which was a quality that annoyed some people and which he had made his peace with. "I think you are right about the stone," he said, finally. "I think it belongs to your clan. I think Venn is the right path and Cole is a bully with money behind him, and I have dealt with that particular type my entire working life." He paused. "And I think you are the most interesting person I have met in a long time, and I would rather spend today watching you recover your clan's hearthstone than doing whatever else I would have done, which was probably walk the timber yards and argue about board measurements." Ugek was quiet for a moment. "The most interesting person," she said, and her tone was thoughtful rather than flattered, as if she was turning the word over. "Not the most frightening. I am not frightened of you. Most people are." "Most people are not paying attention," he said. "You are large and you are a champion and you carry weapons and you are orc, and all of those things make people see the shape of you before they see you. I was watching last night. You gave Haran Cole a chance to leave before you named it an insult to your clan. You introduced your scouts by name when you did not have to. You ate the fish and you slept when I told you to because you knew that both of those were the correct choices regardless of who suggested them. You are a person who makes good decisions under pressure. That is a great deal more interesting than frightening." She looked at him for a long moment. The fair was waking up around them, vendors calling to each other, the smell of hot grain porridge from the breakfast fires, children running between the stall rows sending snow flying from every surface they touched. "My clan's tradition," Ugek said slowly, carefully, "holds that the way to know a person is to watch what they do when nothing requires it of them." She paused. "You were not required to step in front of that knife." "No," Isaac agreed. "But you did." "Yes." She looked at him a long time in the clean, cold air of that snow-white morning, and something shifted in the amber of her eyes. Some internal decision settling into place like a stone, finding the bottom of a clear pool. "Come on then," she said, and walked forward. "We have 3 hours before Cole arrives, and I want to see if the fair cook's porridge is as good as it smelled." Isaac fell into step beside her, and the morning felt lighter than it had any reasonable right to. The eighth bell brought Harren Cole and two of his men into Ven's mediation chamber with the energy of people who had also spent the night without sleep and were considerably less gracious about it. Cole had his chin dressed from the night before's cut, and he wore the expression of a man who had spoken to a lawyer before arriving, which meant he had a legal strategy and felt confident in it. His confidence lasted until Tolo read the clan document into official record. Cole's legal argument was that the stone had changed hands twice since the original alleged theft, that each transaction had been made in good faith by the buying party, and that under the Interclan Commerce Treaty's clause of secondary property transfer, legitimate purchase 3 or more steps removed from the original wrongful taking was considered a clean acquisition. Isaac had been expecting this. He had thought about it between the fourth and fifth bell while Ugek slept and the fire burned low. He spoke before Ugek could, which earned him a sharp sideways look from her. The secondary transfer clause requires, he said, that each intermediate transaction was conducted without knowledge of the contested origin. However, the clan document shows that Duval, the first buyer, was informed of the stone's provenance by Kest Pharaoh himself, who told him it was Orc clan property. Duval's estate therefore could not transfer a clean title because Duval's own acquisition was not clean. The chain breaks at the first link. Everything after Duval is null on contested property grounds. Ven looked at Isaac with something like respect. He wrote something in his ledger. "Do you have a legal background, Mr. Boone?" "No, sir. I build boats." "But boats break the same way, always at the first compromise joint." Cole's lawyer made a noise. Cole made a louder one. Ven held up one hand and the room went quiet. The ruling took 20 minutes and went entirely the way it needed to go. The Hearthstone was to be released from the lock vault into the custody of Ugek Wildheart, champion and acting representative of the Ironmaw clan, effective immediately. Cole's consortium was entitled to pursue civil remedy against the Duval estate through proper channels, none of which involved the Ironmaw clan or the stone. Attempting to interfere with the transfer of the stone would constitute a direct violation of the Interclan Commerce Treaty, which carried penalties Cole was very much not in a position to absorb. Cole left the room without speaking. His lawyer left the room without looking at anyone. Ven poured himself more tea and told Preth and Dana where the lock vault was. The hearthstone was heavier than it looked. Isaac had been expecting something roughly the size of a large loaf of bread, and it was, but granite was granite. And when Ugek placed it on the table before him in the vault anteroom and unrolled the cloth around it, he could see why it had been misclassified as merely decorative. It was beautiful, deeply red, almost rust-colored, and the carved glyphs on its 6 faces were worn smooth at the edges with what looked like decades of hands. Not the hands of someone cleaning or transporting it, but the hands of someone touching it in the specific way you touch things that matter. "May I?" he asked before touching it. She looked briefly surprised. Then she nodded. He ran his thumb over one face of glyphs. They were old and careful. "How long has your clan had it?" "The elder speaker who first carved it died before my grandmother was born," Ugek said, quietly. "It has been in our hearth house longer than anyone can remember before that." She looked at it with an expression that was not grief exactly but lived nearby, the same way that her not-quite laugh lived near real laughter. "When it was taken, 3 of our elders refused to enter the hearth house. They said it was wrong to use a house without its heart. They held their ceremonies outside in the cold for 2 full seasons. One of them, the oldest, Elder Bram, he died last winter outside, in a ceremony that should have been indoors in the warm." Isaac sat with that for a moment. "I am sorry," he said. He said it the way he had meant it about his mother, without ornament. "That is why I have been hunting it for 8 months, she said. And why Cole reaching for a knife yesterday actually made things simpler for me in one way, because once he moved first, I was no longer the aggressor in any accounting of this." "Careful thinking," he said. "I told you, clan champion." She wrapped the stone again with practiced care. He is not done, though, you know that. I know, Isaac said. He had money on this, real money. People with that much invested do not let a mediation hearing end it. He will try again before we can get north. She lifted the wrapped stone against her chest, holding it in the crook of her arm. The passes are still closed under last night's snow. We are stranded here for at least today, possibly 2 more days. Isaac looked at her. We should stay together then, all of us. In the open in the fair where there are too many witnesses for Cole to risk anything direct. He paused. And tonight in the room. She met his eyes. The anteroom was dim and cold and smelled of iron from the vault door, and the moment stretched in the particular way that moments stretch when 2 people are both deciding the same thing from different sides. In the room, she agreed. And then quieter, with something in it that was nothing at all to do with practicality. Yes, they spent the day in the fair. It was a fair choice, and also it turned out to be something else. It turned out to be the most unexpectedly pleasant day Isaac Boone had spent in recent memory, which was not what he had anticipated when he had planned to deliver timber and argue about board measurements. Ugek was not a person who relaxed easily in public. He could see that in the early hours, the way she scanned every cluster of people, kept her scouts in her peripheral vision, positioned herself with the crowd to her front and nothing at her back. That was the training. That was the champion's habit. But as the morning wore on and Cole did not reappear, and the fair buzzed and sparkled in the fresh snow, and the stall vendors called their wares and roasting chestnuts filled every corner of the air with warm sweetness, something in her loosened. She paused at a stall selling hand-tooled leatherwork. She spent 8 minutes considering a braided leather cord before buying it, which Isaac learned later was an extremely long time for her to deliberate anything. She asked the stall woman questions about the braiding technique in a way that was purely curious, purely interested, with no strategic dimension at all. He watched her at the next stall, painted clay whistles shaped like birds, a craft vendor's booth staffed by a girl of about 12 who was absolutely terrified by the tall orc woman, and then absolutely enchanted when Ugek crouched down to the girl's eye level, picked up the smallest whistle, and blew a single clear note through it, and smiled. The girl sold her 2 whistles. Isaac bought a bag of roasted chestnuts and offered Ugek half without saying anything. She took them. Their fingers touched briefly in the exchange, warmth against the cold, and neither of them remarked on it. They ate standing at the edge of the central fair square, where a company of performers was doing acrobatics in the snow to a growing crowd, and Isaac was aware the entire time of exactly how close she was standing, her shoulder beside his temple, the leather and clean winter smell of her, and the way she laughed at the acrobat who slipped on the snow and turned the fall into an intentional roll that brought the crowd roaring. "Your clan," he said, between chestnuts. "Do you have family there?" "Beyond the clan, I mean." "My mother," she said. "She manages the winter supply stores and she is better at it than anyone else has ever been. She has no patience for nonsense and she makes a flatbread that would make you want to stay all winter." She paused. "My father died when I was 17, raiding dispute on the eastern border. It was before my time as champion." She was quiet for a moment. "I never quite got to tell him I had won the belt. He would have liked knowing." What do you think he would have said? She thought about it. He would have said, "Good, now try to need it less." She smiled, a slow private thing. He believed strength was most useful when you did not have to use it. He was the most patient man I have ever known. She looked at the acrobats. "And he was the size of you, more or less, short even among humans." Isaac registered this. "Your father was human. My mother is full Ironmaw. My father was from a border settlement, a shepherd's family originally. He joined the clan when he was 22 and he never left." She said it simply. "He was not large, he was not loud, he did not win any belts. But my mother chose him out of every warrior in the clan, and she chose him again every day afterward for 30 years, and everyone who watched them understood why eventually, even the ones who questioned it at first." Isaac looked at the acrobats and did not trust himself to say anything for a moment. "He never bowed to anyone," Ugek continued, her voice soft. Not in the way of stubbornness or pride. Just he was simply himself everywhere in every situation, and he did not shrink or perform or apologize for existing in a space where he was the smallest person in it. She glanced at Isaac, sideways, and there was something warm and direct in it. He would have liked you. It landed in Isaac's chest like a coal dropped into tinder, slow burn and definitive. He looked up at her. She was already looking at the acrobats again, her jaw composed and neutral, but the copper rings in her braided hair caught the winter light, and her profile was sharp and beautiful against the pale sky. "I think I would have liked him very much," Isaac said. They stood together in the cold and the noise and the chestnut smoke, and the fair turned around them, and it felt like something that had been moving toward this point for a long time without either of them having planned it. Harren Cole made his second move that afternoon. It was not a knife this time. He had been smarter. He had gone to 2 of the other Merchant Guild representatives at the fair and spent the morning building a narrative. That the Ironmaw clan was here to seize goods by force, that the clan document was forged, that the mediation ruling had been corrupted by a bribed harbor dockworker. He had not needed all of it to be believed, only enough of it to create general discomfort. By the 3rd bell of afternoon, there was a group of about 30 people gathered at the entrance of the East Market Hall, which was the building nearest the Miller's Lodge, and Cole was in the middle of them, talking. Isaac and Ugek came around the corner of the grain stall and walked straight into it. The crowd saw Ugek first. That was always the way of it. She was hard to miss. And because Cole had spent the morning planting seeds, the crowd's first reaction was an unpleasant combination of things. Not a mob, not quite, but the potential energy of one, people drawing back. Someone saying something sharp in a language Isaac did not know, a ripple of hostile attention. Cole stepped forward. He was doing it differently now. No knife, no violence, just the raised voice of a man with an audience who believes the audience is on his side. "That is the orc who robbed the Fairmaster's vault," he said, clearly and loudly. "Ven's ruling was bought. The stone in her possession was a legitimate purchase made through proper auction, and she took it by threats and fabricated documents. These people are here to steal from the Ashford Fair, and I am asking every citizen and merchant present to help me take back what was stolen." It was a good speech. It had the rhythm of a man who had practiced it. And the crowd had enough people in it who were already uncomfortable with an orc champion and 2 armed scouts standing in their market to make the silence after it dangerous. Ugek did not move. She stood exactly where she had stopped, with the hearthstone under her arm, and her scouts a half-step behind her, and she let the speech finish. Isaac stepped forward. He stepped forward into the open space between Ugek and the crowd, and he was aware of being very clearly the smallest person in this particular story, and he did not care at all. "My name is Isaac Boone," he said, and he projected it the way he had learned to project on noisy docks with wind and machinery, clear and carrying without shouting. "I work the South Docks at Grayville. I hold a current commission from the Ashford Harbor Guild with Oro Ven's counterstamp. I was present in Ven's mediation chamber this morning, when the dispute over this stone was formally heard and lawfully decided. I can produce that commission, and Ven himself is 40 yards away and will confirm every word of what I just said to any person in this crowd who would like to walk over and ask him." He let that land. The ruling was not bought. The document was not forged. It was read into official record by a licensed clan script reader who has served this fair for 12 years. Harren Cole lost a legal proceeding this morning in front of a fairmaster because his claim to this property was built on a broken chain of title. What he is doing right now is attempting to use public pressure to take back what he lost in a lawful forum. He paused. Which is the exact opposite of what the Interclan Commerce Treaty protects against. Anyone here who helps him do it becomes legally complicit in a treaty breach. He waited. The crowd was very quiet. Someone near the back of it, a woman with a merchant sash, said loudly, "Interclan treaty breach carries guild suspension. I'm not taking that risk over a rock." Someone else said, Cole's been wrong before. Remember the Millhaven grain dispute last year? The energy shifted. It was not a dramatic reversal. It did not need to be. It just needed the temperature to drop, and it did, the crowd losing its potential energy, people finding reasons to be elsewhere, the ripple running the other direction. Cole's face went through several things. You people are, he started. Finished with this conversation, Isaac said, and turned his back on Cole. He walked back to Ugek. She was looking at him with an expression he had not seen on her face before. It was not surprise exactly. It was more like recognition, the look of someone who has been describing a place from memory and then walked into it and found it exactly as they remembered. He was half my size, she said softly to herself, so quiet Isaac barely caught it. And then to him, that was well done. He was going to keep trying unless someone made the cost visible, Isaac said. It is the same as a faulty plank on a dock. You point at it loudly in front of everyone and then nobody walks on it. Is everything an analogy about docks for you? Most things. Her scouts, he noticed, were looking at him with an entirely different kind of attention than they had started the day with. Cole was not finished. That was the honest truth, and they both knew it. A man who had invested that much in a single acquisition, who had now been publicly embarrassed twice in one day, was not going to simply go back to Millhaven and absorb the loss. He had 4 men with him, and he had another night in Ashford while the passes stayed closed, and humiliation had a way of burning off whatever remained of a man's patience. Ugek posted her scouts at the lodge entrance after dark, which was the correct decision, and she and Isaac shared the room again, and the night began with both of them sitting at the table, her with the wrapped hearthstone in front of her, him with a cup of cold tea he had not gotten around to reheating, and the fire burning and the snow pressing the world small and close outside. Tell me about Grayville, she said, out of the comfortable quiet. He told her. He told her about the harbor in the way that someone tells you about a place. They know the way they know their own name, not explaining it, just inhabiting it. The South Docks, the smell of salt-treated timber and low tide, the cranes and the capstans and the way light hit the water in the early morning when the fishing boats went out. The boat builder's yard where he had worked since he was 17, shaping keels and ribs, learning how things held together under pressure. The small room above a rope maker's shop where he lived alone and ate alone and was, he said without drama or self-pity, fairly accustomed to his own company by now. No family left in Grayville, she asked. My mother, he said, died 2 winters ago. My father left when I was young. I have a friend in the yard, Cable, who I drink with on rest days, and the rope maker's wife who lives above me brings down bread sometimes when she has extra. That is about the whole of it. Ugek listened to this in full. Do you mind it, the aloneness? I minded it less before tonight, he said, and it came out before he could decide whether to say it, honest and unguarded, and he met her eyes rather than looking away, because he had decided in the cold of the fair that morning that he was done with apologizing for what he felt. The amber eyes were still. The fire made small sounds. The snow pressed. She reached across the table and put her hand over his large and warm and deliberate, the way everything she did was deliberate, and she left it there. He turned his hand over and held hers. They sat like that for a while without saying anything, and it was the most not alone Isaac Boone had felt in 2 years. After a time she said quietly, in Ironmaw tradition, when a champion claims a person as her own, she marks them. She was looking at their joined hands. Not a wound, a mark of favor. Oil and the champion's glyph pressed at the pulse point. It is a declaration. She paused. It is not something I have done before. I have never, she stopped. I have never wanted to with anyone. Isaac was quiet, listening to the fire and the snow. I have a small pot of the oil in my kit, she said. I am not suggesting, she stopped again. I am saying I understand that you are human and this is not your custom, and I am not asking you to, Ugek, he said. She looked at him. Show me, he said. She was very still for a moment. Then she reached into the inner pocket of her leather vest, the same pocket she had kept the clan document in, and brought out a small stoppered clay pot, the size of his thumb. She opened it. The oil inside smelled of pine resin and smoke and something sweet that he could not name. She dipped her thumb. She looked at him. He offered his left wrist, pulse side up. She pressed her thumb to his pulse point and drew, slowly and with total attention, the Iron Maw clan champion's glyph. He could feel the oil and the warmth of her thumb and his own pulse underneath, very clear, and the room was small and warm and the world outside was snow white and still. When she finished, she held his wrist for a moment, not pressing, just holding. "What does it mean?" he asked. "The glyph." "Chosen," she said. "Mine." He looked up at her. She was looking at his wrist, and then she looked at his face, and there was something in the amber of her eyes that was open in a way he had not seen from her before, something fierce and uncertain in equal measure, the particular combination of a person who is very strong and very brave, and is currently terrified of something that has nothing to do with knives. He lifted his free hand and touched her jaw. She turned her face very slightly into his palm, just a fraction, and closed her eyes for 1 second with the expression of someone who has been cold for a long time and has just come inside. "I have not," he started. "Neither have I," she said. "Not like this." He pulled her forward and she came, and the kiss was slow and certain, the way things settle when they have found their right place. No urgency and no hesitation, and the fire warm behind them, and the snow locked outside, and the hearthstone on the table between the candles. And Ugek Wildheart made a small sound against his mouth that was the most human and ordinary and real sound he had ever heard from anyone. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his temple, which was where it reached, and breathed. "Purely practical," she said. He laughed, genuine and surprised, the best kind. She laughed too, low and rich, and it filled the room entirely. Harren Cole came before dawn. Isaac woke to the sound of Dana's sharp whistle from the hall, one short, one long, one short, which Ugek had told him before they slept was the Iron Maw signal for immediate threat, multiple hostiles. He was on his feet before the whistle finished. Ugek was already up, the short axe in her hand, the hearthstone bundled and slung at her hip in 2 seconds. They heard it, 4 sets of boots in the corridor, fast. Preth's voice outside. "They have a bar rod for the door." And then a heavy impact that shook the door in its frame. Ugek looked at Isaac. He was already moving, hooking a stool under the door handle while she braced her shoulder against the door's reinforcing beam. The second impact hit harder. The iron lock groaned. "Window," she said. "Drop to the ground, turn right. There is a gap in the granary wall that feeds to the main square," he said. He had checked this the first night. He checked exits the way he checked timber first thing. The third impact cracked the door's lower panel. Through it they could hear Harren Cole's voice, tight and furious. "Get it open." Ugek went through the window first, hearthstone and all, hitting the snow-covered ground in a crouch with a silence that was frankly impressive for someone her size. Preth and Dana were already there. They had come around from the hall. Isaac dropped from the window sill and landed hard enough to knock his teeth together, came up running, and Ugek's hand found his wrist in the dark and pulled, and they were moving. Behind them, the door came off its frame with a crash loud enough to wake the entire lodge. The granary gap was exactly where Isaac had said it was. They went through single file, boots on packed snow, and came out into the main square of the Ashford Harvest Fair as the sky above was going from black to deep indigo with the first suggestion of morning. The square was not empty. Oro Ven was there. He was there because Dana had been smart enough to send someone to him when she spotted Cole's men assembling in the hall, and Ven was accompanied by 4 of the fair's official watchmen, large men with official lanterns and official crossbows. And behind them, rubbing sleep from his eyes but present, was Tolo, the clan script reader, who had apparently decided that this matter was important enough to warrant a second early morning. Cole and his men came out of the lodge behind them and walked into the scene of Oro Ven, his watchmen, and the assembled witnesses, with Ugek Wildheart standing in the center of the square holding a clan hearthstone and looking like exactly what she was. The watchmen's crossbows were not pointed at her. Cole stopped. "Harren Cole," Ven said, in the voice of a man who was done being charitable about any of this. "You are in violation of a lawful mediation ruling, a treaty clause, and the Ashford Fair's formal trespass ordinance, and your men just broke down a rented door, for which the lodge proprietor will be sending you a bill. I have 4 watchmen, 2 witnesses, and enough documentation to have you suspended from every fair north of the Millhaven Road for the next 5 years." He paused. "Would you like to do this the difficult way or the sensible way?" Cole's 4 men were looking at the crossbows. Cole looked at Ugak. He looked at Isaac standing beside her. He looked at the small oil mark on Isaac's wrist, visible in the growing light, which meant nothing to him and everything to the Ironmaw scouts behind her. Whatever he saw when he looked at Isaac, it was clearly not what he had expected to see when he had started all of this. He chose the sensible way. The watchman took Cole and his men to the fair house for processing. It would be fines and suspension and the formal complaint logged against the consortium, and none of it would feel like enough to Ugak, Isaac suspected, and probably none of it would feel like enough to him either. But it was done. The stone was safe. The passes would open today or tomorrow. The Ironmaw clan would have their hearthstone back. He stood in the snow-white square in the early morning and breathed. Ugak came and stood beside him. Around them the fair was beginning its day, vendors emerging from their lodges, smoke rising from the breakfast fires, the smell of porridge and fresh bread and cold, clean air. "Well," she said. "Well," he agreed. "Cole's lawyer will probably file appeals for the next 2 seasons," she said. "Nothing will come of it, but he will file them." "Let him file," Isaac said. "The ruling stands." He looked at her. "When do you leave?" "The passes will be open enough by midday." She was quiet for a moment. "My clan needs the stone. Elder Speaker Mara will want to reconsecrate the hearth house as soon as possible. There are people waiting." She paused. "My mother is waiting." "I know," he said. He looked at his wrist, at the glyph there drying in the cold air. "I know." She turned to face him fully. She was so much larger than him that when she put both hands on his face, it was like being held by the landscape, encompassing and certain. And she looked at him the way she had looked at the hearthstone before it was taken, with the expression of someone who has found the thing they did not know they were missing. "Isaac Boone," she said. "Dockworker from Grayville, timber and foundations." "That is me," he said. "Grayville is on the Harbor Road," she said. "The Harbor Road runs north and meets the Ironmaw Range Trail at the 3rd crossroads post." "I know that road," he said carefully. "In the winter the trail is passable on horseback in about 5 days from Grayville." She was watching his face. "In spring it is 3 days on a clear road. In summer our clan holds a harvest and trade gathering that lasts a full week and visitors are welcomed." She paused. "I am telling you this information." "You are telling me this information," he agreed. "My mother," she said, "makes flatbread. You mentioned that. The clan's master woodworker retired last season. We have been looking for someone who understands timber, specifically the structural timbers of the longhouse frames, which keep settling in the eastern section in a way that the current builder cannot diagnose. That sounds like a foundation problem. Everyone tells me it is a foundation problem. It almost always is," he said, "diagnosed by the first compromised joint." She was looking at him with the alive, burning amber eyes, the fire behind them, the morning coming up around them gold and clear over the snow-covered fair. "Come in spring," she said. "Come and look at the longhouse frames." She was trying to be practical, and the practical scaffolding was visibly not doing what it was supposed to do. Her voice, when it came again, was simply honest. "Come because I am asking you to come, Isaac. Come because I want you there." He reached up and covered one of her hands with his where it rested on his jaw. "I will come in spring," he said. "I will look at your longhouse frames. I will bring my tools." He turned his head slightly and pressed his mouth against her palm, brief and certain. "And I will come because you asked." Her exhale was slow and warm in the cold air. Preth and Dana, who had been standing at the edge of the square throughout this exchange, with the deliberate inattention of people who were absolutely paying attention, Both turned away and found urgent business regarding the fair stalls. Ugek wrapped her arms around Isaac and pulled him against her, which meant his face was against her collarbone and her chin was at the top of his head, and she was enormous and warm and smelled of pine resin oil and winter air, and he felt less alone than he had in years, complete and specific, like a plank fitted exactly to its place in a hull. He held on. They stood in the middle of the Ashford Harvest Fair in the first real light of a clear-skied morning with snow everywhere and the world laid open around them, and it was good. She left at midday as the passes opened. The hearthstone was wrapped and tied to her pack, and she stood at the north edge of the fair ground with her scouts, and they said goodbye without making it longer than it needed to be, because it was not really goodbye. She gripped his hand once, firm and enveloping, and looked at him. He looked back. "Spring," he said. "Spring," she said, and the copper rings in her braided hair caught the midday light as she turned north. He watched until she was past the second turn of the north road. Then he went to find Oro Ven and apologize for the lodge door, which was also his door in the sense that it was his room that had gotten it broken, and to ask if anyone in the Ashford area needed a structural timber consultation, because he was going to need to save money for a horse and spring road provisions and gifts for a champion's mother who made excellent flatbread. Ven told him the new bridge crossing in the western quarter had a suspicious settling in the main support beam, and had him look at it that afternoon. It was a foundation problem. Isaac fixed it, earned a fair consulting fee, and left Ashford 4 days later when the road south opened, with enough for a good horse and his tools and the glyph on his wrist gone to a faint impression in the skin that he traced sometimes when he was thinking, which was more often than he expected. He built boats through the winter. He built a good one, a river-worthy craft with fitted caulked joints and a keel that he was genuinely proud of. He ate alone in his room and drank with Cable on rest days and listened to the rope maker's wife come and go overhead, and he was alone, and he did not mind it the way he used to, because he was not facing more aloneness, he was facing spring. He thought about the way Ugek had said chosen mine, with her thumb at his pulse. He thought about her face turning into his palm in the firelight. He thought about her laughing, low and real and filling the small room. He built the winter and spent toward spring the way you spend toward a tide you can already hear coming. He left Grayville the morning after the first crocuses showed on the harbor road bank, with a good solid bay horse and his tools, and a roll of the best timber assessment documents he owned, and a small jar of Harbor District honey from the market, because the rope maker's wife had told him you should always bring something good to a mother's table. He rode north. The harbor road was muddy with thaw, and then firmer as it rose, and he passed through 3 settlements and 2 river crossings and ate at roadside posts, and slept under the sky twice when the road outpaced the lodging. His horse was sensible and good-tempered, and the weather was clear, the specific cold clear of early spring that felt like the world had washed its face. On the morning of the 5th day, he came to the 3rd crossroads post that Ugek had described, and he found the Ironmaw Range Trail on the left-hand fork, and he turned north into country that opened into long views of rock and pine and the far blue shapes of the mountains. He was 2 hours up the trail when he heard hooves coming the other direction, fast. He pulled his horse to the verge and looked up the trail. Ugek Wildheart came down the trail at a full canter on a large gray horse, her hair down from the warrior's not today and blowing back with her speed, and she pulled up 30 yards short of him and her horse blew steam in the cold air, and she looked at him sitting on his bay horse in the middle of the trail with his tools rolled across the back, and she looked like someone who had been counting the days without saying so. He looked at her, which was frankly no difficulty. "You are early," she said. "The crocus bloomed early," he said. "I told my scouts you would probably arrive in the next 2 days and I was checking the trail," she said with dignity. "Every day. The 3rd day in a row, yes." She did not look embarrassed. She looked exactly like herself, direct and certain and present, the amber eyes burning in the cold spring light. My mother has been making flatbread every morning for a week. We should not waste flatbread, Isaac said. She swung her horse around and came alongside him, and they rode north together up the trail into the mountains. And she told him about the hearth house consecration that Elder Speaker Mara had performed the same evening the stone came home, and how her mother had wept, and how Elder Bram's family had held the ceremony for his memory that they had not been able to hold before. And her voice when she talked about it was quiet and complete, the voice of something resolved. "And the longhouse frames?" Isaac asked. "Still settling in the eastern section. The current builder has declared it a permanent quality of the structure and refused to look further." "Has he looked at the foundation?" "He has declined to." "Then I will look at the foundation." "I know you will," she said, and she was smiling, facing forward on her horse, not at him, but for him, the private sharp-edged smile he had first seen in a harvest hall with a knife on the floor and lantern smoke in the air. The Ironmaw clan hold was a gathering of long houses and smaller structures set into a natural shelf in the mountain rock, old and settled-looking, with smoke coming from every chimney, and a clan symbol carved into the stone arch of the main gate that Isaac recognized from the hearthstone's glyphs. People came out to see them arrive, a clan going about its day, stopping to look, and they looked at Ugek with the ease of people accustomed to their champion, and they looked at Isaac with the careful attention of a community that had learned to read strangers. A woman came out of the main long house who was very obviously Ugek's mother. The same jaw, the same amber eyes, a broader face and iron-gray hair in a single braid, and a working apron dusted with flour. She looked at Isaac on his horse. She looked at the mark on his wrist that was still visible, faded but present. She looked at her daughter. "Tall man," she said to Ugek. "He is the height he is, mother," Ugek said, in the tone of someone who had possibly had this conversation from the other direction many times as a child. Ugek's mother looked at Isaac for a long moment with amber eyes that missed nothing. Then she jerked her head toward the main house. "Get that horse stabled. Come inside. The flatbread is hot." It was the best flatbread Isaac had ever eaten. He ate it at a table in the main long house with Ugek's mother, whose name was Yara, and two of the clan's senior members who had come to look at this human who wore the champion's mark. And he answered their questions directly and without performance about Grayville, about boats, about his work, about how he and Ugek had met. And when he got to the part about the knife in the harvest hall, Yara looked at him with an expression that her daughter sometimes wore and said, "And you stepped in front of it." "Yes," he said. "Why?" "She did not see it coming," he said, "and I did." Yara was quiet for a moment. Then she tore another piece of flatbread and put it on his plate without comment, which Ugek, across the table, recognized as the highest available form of approval. He spent the next 3 days on the eastern longhouse frames. He found the foundation problem on the second day, a settling stone in the northwest corner that had been miscut at installation, probably decades ago, that had gradually propagated a lateral shift through the entire eastern wall. It was not dramatic. It was not dangerous, not yet. It was exactly the kind of thing that could be corrected if you caught it before it became dramatic and dangerous. He showed it to the clan's current builder, who was defensive about it for about an hour, and then helped him fix it with a combination of leveling shims and properly cut replacement stone that took the better part of a day to set. On the 4th evening, Ugek found him sitting on the wall outside the long house with his hands still rough from the stonework, watching the mountains go purple in the setting sun. She sat beside him, close, her thigh against his, and looked at the same mountains. "The eastern wall is stable," he said. "I know, the builder told me." She paused. "He is still annoyed that it took a stranger to find it. He will get over it." He did good work on the rest of the structure. The eastern corner was old and subtle. "You are generous with him," she said. "He is a good builder who missed one thing. People should not be defined by the one thing they miss." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Are you going back to Grayville?" "I should," he said carefully. "I have work there. Cable will be wondering where I am. The rope maker's wife will have run out of extra bread." "Yes," she said. "I understand." "But I am also," he said. a dockworker with a commission license that I can hold anywhere within 2 weeks of a navigable harbor, and the Ironmaw hold is within a week of the Kelmere harbor on the east coast, which means technically I can operate from here and travel to my commissions as needed and spend the remaining time wherever my tools are useful, which might be a clan hold with good longhouse frames in need of periodic attention. He paused. If the clan would have me. Ugek was very still beside him. If the clan's champion, he continued quietly, would have me. She turned to look at him. The mountain light was gold and violet on her face, catching the copper rings in her hair, and she was so specific and real in that light, so exactly herself, large and beautiful and sharp and certain and fierce, and she was looking at him with open want and open warmth and none of the guard she had used to protect herself in the world. "You are asking to stay," she said. "I am asking to come back," he said, "and to keep coming back, and to eventually stop needing to be asked." He met her eyes. "If that is what you want." "It is," she said. "It is exactly what I want." And the guard was completely down now, the amber eyes fully open, and she reached and pulled him against her side with one arm around his shoulders and held him there, his head against her neck, and said softly into his hair, "Mine." "Yours," he said against her skin. They sat together as the mountains went dark and the clan hold fires came up, and the smell of wood smoke and evening cooking drifted out, and the night was cold and clear and full of stars above the peaks, and the world felt, as it sometimes and rarely does, like it had arrived at the right configuration, people and place in their correct relation to each other, stones set on their true foundation. Spring turned to summer. Isaac rode his commissions and came back. He learned 17 words of Ironmaw clan tongue, most of them useful for structural work, and several of them apparently quite funny in context, which delighted the clan's children and mortified him briefly, and delighted him immediately after. Yara taught him to make the flatbread, which came out half right the first time and better every time after, and Yara declared this acceptable progress. He met Elder Speaker Mara, who was ancient and small and spoke about the Hearthstone's return with a directness that made him feel the full weight of what they had done in that harvest fair, and who looked at the old mark on his wrist with the attention of someone reading a sentence in a language they love. "She has never given that mark before," Mara said. "She told me," Isaac said. "And do you understand what it means among us? Not just the word, but the practice." "It means she claimed me," he said, "and will keep claiming me every day." Mara nodded. "And you?" "Every day," he said, "in the direction she's in." Mara looked at him for a long moment with the ancient amber eyes. "Good," she said. "Stay." He stayed. He and Ugek fought sometimes. She was used to being right, which she often was, and he was used to solving problems alone, which he was often no longer doing, and the friction of those habits rubbing against each other was real and occasionally loud. But they argued fairly, the way people argue when they are not afraid of losing each other, with the specific security of two people who have both decided that the other person is worth the difficulty of honesty. She challenged him once to the clan's traditional partners wrestling, which was a greeting ritual between bonded pairs in Ironmaw culture, and not a serious competition, but which had rules and form to it. He lost magnificently and entirely, which made the whole clan laugh, and which he had known was going to happen and had agreed to anyway. And when she pinned him and bent down close to make sure he was all right, he said, very clearly, in full view of the assembled clan, that she was extraordinary, and kissed her jaw, and the clan laughed more, and Ugek made the sound she had made in the fire-lit room in Ashford, the one that was simply human and real. The first Ashford Harvest Fair after that, a full year after they had met, they went together. They rode down the mountain road and the harbor road, and arrived at Ashford's gates with the autumn crowds pressing in, the smell of roasting grain and apple wine in the air, the lanterns strung between the stalls, the whole fair blazing exactly as it had the year before. Oro Ven saw them arrive from across the fair square, and came to meet them with an expression of warm relief. "No stolen relics this year," he said by way of greeting. I made the fair guard specifically check incoming lockboxes after last autumn. No stolen relics, Ugek confirmed. We are here for the fair. Just the fair. Flatbread ingredients, Isaac said. A specific grain press that Yara wants, and Preth has been wanting to look at the leatherwork since last year. Ven looked at the two of them standing together in the crowd. The enormous orc champion with her warrior's leathers and copper-ringed hair, and the dockworker from Grayville who came up to her chin, and stood with his hand resting at her back with the ease of someone who has been standing exactly there for a long time, and he smiled the smile of a man who considers the outcomes of his decisions. "Welcome back to Ashford," he said. They moved into the fair with the crowds pressing around them, the autumn colors and the harvest smell and the noise of it, and Ugek took his hand at some point between the grain press stall and the leatherwork rows and kept it, her large fingers certain around his, and they walked through the whole of the fair like that, he, half her height, and she, the champion who could have had anyone who had chosen him, again and again, every day in the direction he was in. He bowed to no one. He had never bowed to anyone. Except her. Not in submission, not in fear, not in deference, but in the old and honest sense of something bending toward what it loves, the way a tree bends toward light, the way a tide bends toward the shore, the way a hull bends to the shape of the water it was built for. They bought Yara's grain press and Preth's leather cord and a bag of chestnuts from the same vendor as the year before, and they ate them standing at the edge of the main square in the October cold, watching an entirely different company of acrobats in the snow. At one point, Ugek elbowed him gently and pointed. One of the acrobats slipped on the exact same patch of snow as the one from last year and pulled the same deliberate fall-into roll that brought the crowd roaring. They looked at each other. They started laughing at the same time, real, unguarded laughter, the kind that spills over whatever control you have put around yourself. The kind that is not about being funny, but about being fully present with another person in a moment and needing them to feel it too. She was laughing, copper rings catching the lantern light, amber eyes bright, enormous and beautiful and real. He was laughing, standing in her shadow in the best possible sense of the word, the kind of shadow that is warmth rather than darkness, shelter rather than diminishment, a champion's shadow, cast over the man she had chosen out of everything else. The fair turned around them, bright and loud and alive. The snow fell soft as autumn promises, and they were exactly where they were supposed to be.